for this week, we can get right into the main event from last week. Roman Dolidze, Nasruddin Imavov. Jerry, you can go ahead and get us started. What'd you make of this fight, and what'd you make of Imavov's performance?
I mean, I think Imavov did what he had to do to get the win. Obviously, it wasn't the prettiest thing in the world. I know there was some doctor stoppages at times, but it's one of those fights that he did what he had to do, beat the higher ranked guy, and I'm interested to see what he does next, considering the mess we have at the top of the lightweight division. I mean, I guess middleweight division at the moment. I don't know why I blanked on that one, but yeah, the middleweight division is kind of a mess, and we'll see what happens because obviously not this weekend, but the following weekend with Taporia and Volk, they have the fight between Paulo Costa and Robert Whitaker, so that'll be interesting to see what happens there. I could see him fighting potentially the loser of that fight. Something like that would make sense to me, but as far as this one, he kind of dominated Dolidze for the most part. It's kind of surprised that there was a ref that had or a judge that had this fight as a draw, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to touch on once we got a little bit further into this was the draw scorecard because that was absolutely atrocious. But Anthony, what'd you make of the fight as a whole?
Um, Kind of a lot of the same things that Jerry said. I mean, it's hard to a win is a win, especially with that type of fight, two ranked fighters. Um, and I do want to say, I think Imavov looked good in parts or in stretches to where it's like, okay, there is something here, but it was, I don't know, it wasn't a great performance by either of them in a sense because it just like when you get so gassed eventually too towards the end of the fight, it's fighting just looks sloppy and bad. But I mean, I think they both showed some good things, both showed some bad things, and then to entertainment factor overall, there was enough illegal kicks and yelling at people and stuff like that. So, I mean, overall, it was it was actually about the most middleweight main event you could make for someone that's not an Izzy or Robert Whitaker, actually. So that actually kind of summed up the middleweight right
Yeah,
there.
that is a good point. This is the middleweight division as we have right now, and I agree that this was, Imavov did exactly what he needed to do to get a win, and to me, it felt like the first round he put so much out there. He had Dolidze hurt so bad, you can argue that it should have been stopped in the first round. First round was very dominant, and then after that, it was like, all right, I've got this guy. I can hit him whenever I want to, but I can't gas out hitting him because he had Dolidze. It felt to me like Dolidze never recovered from the first big exchange. So then it was, I can jab him whenever I want, I can kick him when I want, but I can't gas out beating him up because then Dolidze, we saw in the fourth round, still had some scrambling, still attacked some leg locks. So if Imavov would have gassed out trying to finish him, he probably ends up getting finished in some sort of heel hook type submission. So he couldn't really put too much out there to go get the finish. And even though Imavov hurt Dolidze, he doesn't hit the hardest when it comes to being the middleweight. He's more of a, he's going to pace you to a decision. He's going to outland you. He's going to stay safe and not get hit much. So he did that. It was a good performance on his side of things. And he'll probably get a bump up in competition. That was one of the things that I thought coming in, that the winner would get a bump up. So I think the loser of the Whitaker and Paulo Costa fight is a fair fight. But if it's Paulo Costa, he may have to wait 2 years to get that fight, unfortunately. One of the other things I wanted to ask was, do you guys feel like Roman Dolidze has kind of hit a wall and has regressed? Because in my opinion, he's 35. And to me, it felt like he aged to 35 overnight. He looked much better against Vittori. When he was 34, he didn't look 34, he looked 29. And now he's 35 and he looks 40. So do you guys think I'm right on this? Do you think I'm wrong? Where do you guys kind of fall on Dolidze's performance and how he looked in there? And then Anthony, you can go ahead this time.
Yeah, I wanted to say because I had done a couple of those, before they ranked articles on fighters where that are unranked that I think could be ranked in possible title contenders, and I had picked Dolidze, but Yeah, it's not looking too good anymore. Because I want to say I don't remember was that the Tory fight was last year, and I remember it was pretty close. I even thought Dolidze might have won. I haven't seen it again since though, but I remember thinking it was really close. And then to turn in the next or for the next performance, just looking slow. And like you said, maybe I'm not giving not credit, but not giving him enough for he just never recovered after that first round. But it was all the things that you see him do on a good night in the office. They weren't really there too often throughout that fight, and so I think yeah, definitely he could be hitting a wall and some things. But it's who's his coach again?
He's at Extreme Couture with Nick Sick and
Right,
Strickland and Curtis and those guys.
because with Nick Sick, you hear all like about all these game plans and stuff, and then it just seemed like there was no real adjustments or game planning happening. And not to say that it wasn't Dolidze from being so tired and already battered a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. For first 5 round fight, it wasn't ideal for someone that still has aspirations to go higher. It did look like he was plateauing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think on last week's episode, I said this is the beginning of his final chance at going for a title. I think he needed to win this fight and kind of start moving up because if he lost, which he ultimately did, at 35, and with the way the middleweight division's going, obviously we have that star-studded top, but also this upcoming weekend, Jack Hermanson, Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer is one of those dangerous up-and-comers that the way he looked, I think he could potentially beat Roman Dolidze. So that's something like this new generation's coming in, and there's these new guys, and Dolidze's kind of stuck in that middle where I don't think he'll ever make it a title run now. And sad as it is for him, it's how the fight game works. Not
Mm-hmm.
everyone gets a title shot. Majority of people really don't even get close to it.
Yeah. And a couple more things I'll add on here real quick is I think he won the Vittori fight,
That's
and
fine.
that ultimately hurts him a lot. Um, and I know that was pretty much one round apiece. Round three was pretty close. I've watched that fight at least 3 times and scored it all every time I thought Dolidze won the last round. I watched it before Cannonier fought Vittori. I watched it before Dolidze fought last weekend, and I watched it live all 3 times. Thought Dolidze won. So and that's the type of fight where you lose to Vittori and now you're fighting Imavov instead of who would he have fought? Maybe a Duplessis, maybe a Cannonier. Maybe he gets a Whitaker fight. You never know how the matchmaking plays out if he wins. Um, and the other thing I'll say is that, in my opinion, Dolidze has always kind of been a one-trick pony on the feet. Very powerful guy, those big hooks. Not my favorite, but it works a lot better because he has such elite jiu-jitsu. But in this fight, I think he went from those hooks were never fast; they were slow. And in this fight, he went from being slow to he looked very slow, which cuts your chances of landing those shots in more, in a half, basically, even more extreme than that. It makes it almost impossible to land. So it makes it hard to really get excited about Dolidze. And it sucks because there's some potential there, there's some talent there, but he got started in MMA very, very late. This is a 35-year-old with less than 20 fights. So it is kind of a shame, even though it is kind of the reality of the situation for Dolidze. All right.
That was
And
my one last thing, real quick. That was even when I wrote the
mhm.
article the first time. It's because even at that level, I was hoping for some progression too in the striking. But yeah, it is. It's just too late. It's too late.
Mhm. And I think that's reasonable because could you imagine if he added a jab, for example?
Hmm.
Could you imagine if he added some leg kicks, some body kicks? It's like there's some real potential to where, oh, he gets a good jab. Now you're all of a sudden you're landing those hooks more frequently because you can set them up better. So I don't think that's unreasonable at all. And I do want to touch on kind of the controversy surrounding this fight. The illegal kick and the draw scorecard are the two things that kind of stand out to me here. Um, I don't know how much you guys want to talk about the illegal kick because, in my opinion, this is very simple. And I just want to say this that rule should be changed. I think if you have two hands on the mat, you should be allowed to be hit. You know, if you don't want to be in that position, you can escape from that position. Right now, we're seeing a lot of guys stall out positions just by putting two hands on the mat, when in reality, it's a very vulnerable position, but the rule set protects you. If you have a knee, a butt, an elbow, I think that's when you should be ruled down. What are your guys' opinion? What is your opinion on that rule and that potentially changing, because California State Athletic Commission is trying to get that rule changed to where two hands on the mat doesn't make you a downed opponent? Jerry, take us away on that
I
one.
was gonna say that goes back to what we talked about last week of how the rules in different locations are so different, and there's not a single. Like you're saying, yeah, go to Canada. Things that happened at that pay per view wouldn't have happened had it been in the U.S. When now it's the thing of if California goes and changes it, people in California, obviously, one thing it's legal. Now you might go to a different fight, go to Vegas and do the same thing that's legal in California and get penalized. It's kind of like to me, like the NFL, for example. You need a knee, an elbow, something that to mark you as down. Fighting, it's so easy just to put your hands down and say, "Oh, I'm down. You can't hit me now." It's kind of like what you're saying, a stall tactic to avoid getting damage. I think it should change, but the rules are the rules. I have no issue with it being a point deduction in this instance. That's the rules. You knew what they were coming in. It's not like it's suddenly changed overnight. So that's my thoughts on at least that. And kind of surprised though that the judge that had it a draw gave that round to Dolidze.
Um, this, yeah, I am fine with them changing the rule. I agree. I've heard a lot, a lot of people like you shouldn't necessarily get like a complete cop out mid fight based off a rule of like not being hit. However, that just the one thing I understand is like, yeah, they know that rule's in place. It's still like every time I see it, for the most part, like the Uncle Live one, it was blatant. The Peter Yan one blatant. That Imavov one I thought was pretty blatant as well. I mean, it always feels like there's a pause, like a 1 or 2 second pause, and then the strike happens. And so that's why I don't get it. It's like it just feels like if you know the rules, you should know the rule, and it shouldn't seem it shouldn't. I shouldn't be able to watch him be down and go like, oh, he probably shouldn't kick him right now, and then I see him kick him, and I'm like, okay, well. But so I mean, I just don't understand how fighters keep doing it in a sense. I can see sometimes when it's like super quick or it's like bang bang, but these past couple ones have seemed a little iffy. And then as far as the 10-9, 10-8, I think didn't that ref not have the first round as a 10-8? I thought was the only problem. Otherwise, it would have been a 40, 48, 47 or 47, 46.
I will. So the ref that had it a draw, he the first round was a 10-9,
Yeah.
and then he gave Dolidze rounds 2 and 4. So he had Dolidze winning 2 of those rounds in there.
Mm-hmm. Which I mean, I think if you were trying your hardest to find Dolidze rounds, I think those would have been 2 and 4, if I remember correctly. I remember one round just off of control time, basically. It was like clinch. And then the other one, maybe he landed a couple strikes or like scrambled once.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, I mean, I didn't quite see it that way, but I just think that the only reason that was a problem is because do you guys think there's any way that first round wasn't a 10-8?
I think the first round is a textbook 10-8.
Okay.
I think you can show that as like an example of what a 10-8 round should be.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a surprise that I guess only one of the judges had that as a 10-8 round. So two of them thought it wasn't, which also kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me. And I think round 4, I think is what happened in that round is Dolidze, the kick happens about halfway through that round, the illegal kick. And Dolidze's second half of that round is actually probably his best portion of the fight where he's scrambling, but that's him scrambling to positions after getting hit with the illegal kick. Before the illegal kick, he was getting beat up pretty badly on the feet. So that's kind of like you have this break and you have this pause. It almost feels like you're only scoring the second half of the round after the kick, which is not really how you're supposed to score that. And the one thing I will say about the kick is, Jerry, I agree with you. Even though I'd like to see that rule changed, that is a point in that scenario. And Anthony, great point about every time we see these. Well, not every time. 90% of the time, there's the pause of like, can I kick him? I'm going to kick him. and then
Mhm.
they're not allowed to kick him. There's been a handful of like the Arnold Allen and Movsar Evalev's a decent example of like, is his hand down? Is it not down? We're kind of moving around, but like Piotr Yan kicking Eljo, he's on a knee. Same with Johnny Walker, and those are like obviously terrible. This one was pretty bad as well from Imavov. So yeah, it's some of these have been pretty stupid moves where hey, it's illegal, don't kick him, and then oh, right there comes the kick.
I mean, I still think back to that Piotr Jan one of, at least according apparently what the audio was saying was like, can I kick him? Should I knee him? And his coach was like, yeah, just do it. Not even thinking like, oh, here we go. Because there was a good, I want to say like 3 to 5 seconds of him just sitting there with the position, like thinking about it, kind of what Anthony was saying, and then just does it. And I'm like, man.
So probably just don't throw that strike. Let's
If you're questioning it, don't do it.
especially if they're up
Yeah.
too. It seems like most of the time.
Exactly like that. Like,
Yeah. Jan had Sterling gassed and he was barely able to fight back, and that's when he hits him with it. And it's like, dude, you could have just stood up and told him to stand up and punched him again.
It'd be interesting to see how that entire bantamweight division could have been different had he not done that. But
yes,
Jan lost his next 4 after that, or 3 or something.
Yep. And
after being the scariest man ever, too.
After beating Jose Aldo nearly to like bad
places. Retirement, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
And Uriah.
Yeah, he murdered Uriah. Good stretch. I will say, while we're on the topic of Jan, before we move on, that fight with Song Yadong, great fight, and a guy who's going to actually strike with him, and I think that's going to be a fun one.
Oh, it will be.